In this module, we're going to discuss presence and immersion. So what are they? They're often used interchangeably. They have, a lot of times the definitions overlap. There's different depth between the different definitions. So we're going to start from the top and then try and simplify also the different definitions and to be able to have an understanding and working definition of what they are as you go through your readings and activities for this week. So immersion, it's an object, a characteristic that describes quality or quantity of sensory information provided to a person, say from a video game. Or presence, the subjective feeling of being in a virtual environment where the viewer is unaware of the technological medium for which the environment is being presented. These are the definitions for immersion and presence. Still, what does that mean? Not sure if immersion or presence. This is the big question. And you'll know when you go through your readings, that's what we're all trying to figure out as we go through virtual reality and trying to use immersion and presence and trying to create the experience of immersion and presence. So we're going to try and simplify it to be able to have a working definition when you go through the readings, you go through the activities, and this will be the foundation of your knowledge to then go through and look at the different breakdowns, the different theoretical approaches, and why researchers are trying to really create a good working definition of both immersion and presence, because there's a lot of different approaches to the concept of immersion and presence. So let's simplify it. So the simplified definition, so immersion in the concept of VR. So it's the ability of the virtual reality system to make you feel like you're somewhere else. And so when you go through the readings, it's like people have talked about the concept of immersion or being immersed in a world for many times. And we use that word. So we use that word since even picking up a book. Oh, the world that Tolkien created, or the Harry Potter is a very immersive world. And we've talked about this in looking at movie technology. What does it mean to experience immersion? And we're looking at it from the ability of the virtual reality system, right? So the system that's making you feel like you're somewhere else. And this has to do with the visual processing, the auditory processing, all the resources that are out there. And so it's really an external piece that's looking at what's the technology that can be used to make you feel like you're actually in a virtual or alternative reality. So this becomes what does it really look like? And so if you look at some of the VR games, so for example, a look at Resident Evil 4, if you do a YouTube search and you look at it and you look, you see, well, okay, so in Resident Evil 4, it's not terribly realistic looking. So when you put on the Oculus headset or the gaming headset that it's designed for, you may not feel quite as immersed in the world because it doesn't seem as real. It looks like a video game. It doesn't look like an actual zombie is coming to kill you, or that there's still something in the brain where we say, okay, this isn't quite 100% real. We're not completely immersed in it. The graphics aren't as advanced. I know the difference between the character that I'm seeing in front of me versus somebody that I see when I take the headset off. Presence, though. Presence is how you're really engaged and how you feel within the virtual world. So presence really is much more of an internal user experience. And we're using immersion a lot of times to create presence. So immersion can be more about the system, the technologies. How do you create the most immersive technology that is out there to get a feel of presence for the user? The goal of presence, the idea of making somebody feel so involved in the virtual world that they almost can't tell. And so an example for me of when I really felt present and like I was engaged was when I went to a virtual reality game actively. And so they had the backpack on and it was actually walking around a fairly big area. So imagine like a laser tag arena, but you're in a virtual headset. So it's not just limited to the circular area of your room, the way an Oculus is, but putting the headset on and walking through, and the technology was so good and so lifelike that I really felt like I was walking over that pit of lava, even though I wasn't. My brain really was not able to cognitively distinguish. And so when that fight or flight response was triggered, my brain was responding the way it would be. I think I haven't walked over had the opportunity to walk over pits of lava in my life, but what I would imagine would be that same sort of tiptoeing over very carefully. I mean, it really was very immersive. And because it was such an immersive experience and there was such a high level of immersion, I really felt present within the environment. I was completely engaged. I felt like I was really there. And so that's really when we break it down at the simple level, we create immersive technology to be able to create immersion so that the user can feel present and be present in the moment. And so what does it take to experience presence? And what's interesting, and the text goes into this, and when we're looking at really what does it mean to have virtual reality from reality? And what does it mean to have virtual presence versus reality-based presence? And different theories suggest different things, but is it that different? And when we talk about being present in real life, so let's start at just before we get into virtual or alternative reality, what does it mean to be present in real life? You can show up somewhere and go through the motions and not really be in the moment and be present. Imagine there's different times when you're just you're multitasking, or you're in a meeting and you may actually be sitting in that meeting, but are you really present? Are you really taking everything in? Are you in the moment? And if you've ever done look on employee engagement, and there's about what does that mean to actually be engaged, to be present, to be in the moment, and to get all the way up to that flow concept where things are just coming naturally. And so there's a great deal of research in the world of organizational development that actually looks at presence in the working environment. When you have an employee or a coworker who, they show up to work, they may be sitting next to you or now on the Zoom screen, but are they really there and in the moment? Are they paying attention? And so we look at that of, all right, so when was the last time where you felt really in the moment? You were really present. Was it when you were having a really stimulating conversation, when you were working on a project that you really liked, when you were reading a good book or watching a good movie? What would it take where you felt in the moment and in that world, whether it be your working world, personal life, whatever it is, but the concept of presence, even within our own bodies and our own self. So that is actually analogous to a virtual environment. It's what does it take to get you to stop and be in the moment and to experience that internally. And so we look at different video games, for example, and we may play video games, but it may be almost where you're sort of doing it automatically. This is the learned behavior of body memory, muscle memory of playing a game or your joystick or your controller, and the muscle memory just goes. And there are people who can play games like Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, and they don't even think about it. It's just boom, 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 they're just completely into it, and they've got that flow on it, and they may be in the moment and experiencing that present, and the whole world around them just kind of melts away, and they're just in the zone. If you study sports literature, they talk about this too, of being present within a game and being what it means to be in the zone. And so that's what designing a virtual environment often is trying to create that experience, to being present and being in the moment. Because why would somebody choose to go into a virtual environment? Why would somebody choose to go into that? And is the goal to create a more immersive environment to have people be present? And what does it mean to be present all the time? What does that do to the way that we think, the way that we feel, to be within an environment that feels very real? Does it then start to become more advanced, where, and you'll read about different approaches to being present, and we start to peel back the layers of what presence means. But first, we need to have the foundation of what is immersion and what is presence and how are they different. So when we're looking at a virtual environment, and so what happens is usually there is sort of pre-briefing. So when I was doing that game, you go through the game system, they walk you through it. This is what's going to happen. You're setting the expectations. Do they feel safe? That they know that they are safe. So there is that feeling of psychological safety. So the pre-brief and the notion that they will be safe, so they don't actually feel, for example, if you're doing VR therapy and you're working on a phobia, they know that if they're working through, say, a fear of snakes, that there's not actually going to be a snake that is going to bite them. Okay, they are safe. They can take the headset off at any time. So then we look at, all right, so now we go into the virtual environment. Are they able to move? Can they control their environment? Can they act? Are they able to examine, move things around? What are the devices that are able to be used? Okay? How stressful is it? The internal factors. How experienced are they? The first time that somebody goes into a VR experience or virtual therapy to 5, 6, 7 sessions from them when they're more used to it. Are there social environments around them? Are there other people? Is there another human being with an avatar, or is it a computerized person on the other end? Right? I mean, what is happening? Is it a picture of the snake, or is it an actual video of a snake? What is again the pictorial realism? How much is the brain convincing yourself that, oh wow, that really looks like a real snake that I could reach out and touch? Versus just showing somebody, say, a picture of a snake, and what's going to trigger that phobia in a way that it can then be worked through. And then overcoming the VR sickness and some of the motion sickness that somebody can experience. And so all of this tied together, all of these different components, we want to tie together to have that sense of presence. So if at any moment somebody is, say, in virtual therapy and they get distracted by not being able to move the environments the way that they want to, if you've ever used an Oculus headset and you really want to start playing that game, but you're too busy futzing around trying to get something to move or figure out the logistics of it. And then are you able to actually look around and say, wow, this actually looks like somewhere like a therapist's office room, and I can sit down. It looks like I'm sitting in this couch and I feel like I'm sitting in a therapy session. And so therefore now I can respond to the environment around me in the same way that I would respond to being in a therapeutic environment in reality. And of course, it doesn't look right. And then if you feel sick, if you start to feel sick, you're going to be distracted. You're going to lose that sense of presence. So if you're in your virtual therapy session and you're really getting to some of the work or some of the processing, and then you start to feel dizzy and sick, it's going to take you out of the moment. And these are all things that happen in real life too, where if you're in the middle of something and you feel sick or something doesn't look right, or there's something going on socially, or it's the first time that you're doing something, or you're stressed out, or your computer's not working the way that you want it to. I mean, all of these things interrupt your ability to be in the moment or get to the tasks that you want to get to, or to have you achieve that sense of presence in your real life too. And so all of these things come together to create immersion so that you can create that sense of presence. So we're looking at immersion as external factors that come together to create a sense of human presence and interaction. So if you're looking at it from a design perspective on the back end, and when they create the technology for it, they look at these different layers that they can have. All right, what is the most technology that you can use to create VR immersion? And so if you look at these different options from basic viewing to all the way up to empathetic VR tracking, there is a big difference between, say, a cardboard headset and your smartphone and a headset that has the maximum amount of graphical detail, a body scanner so that you can actually scan somebody's movements and facial recognition or in facial tracking, so that when I smile, my avatar smiles, or they're actually being able to scan so it somewhat looks like me and not just a cartoon character of me. And then movement tracking. And so there's all of these different technologies, and the more immersive that the technology wants to get, generally the more advanced the technology has to be. So we go from what can be a very basic system and may not have a high level of immersion, all the way up to really precise full body tracking and the ability to scan expressions and eye movement. And if you look at even just the way that movies have changed, and if you look and we're looking at the ability to say when they've digitally recreated somebody, there's something about, and we'll talk about this in future modules, what happens to us biologically when we see somebody that's been fully animated. And it's very close. It is very close, but there's parts of the brain that still say, not quite real. One of the examples was given as Carrie Fisher in the movie Rogue One, when they digitally animated her, and she just looked just a little bit different. And so people were really amazed by the technology, but there was still this feeling of, it doesn't quite seem right. I could still be able to tell a completely digitally based person versus a real person, that we could still tell that wasn't the actual actor, it was actually a digital recreation. The technology is getting more and more amazing, but we still see it was Gemini Man with Will Smith when they digitally recreate. I mean, you could just, or do they de-age people, right? I mean, you can still see there's still something about the brain that registers, it doesn't look quite like the real person. Again, there's a whole phenomenon for the brain that we'll talk about in future modules, but the graphics for VR immersion are quite advanced, and the more advanced they are, the more cleaner effectively they are, the more likely again that we are to feel that sense of presence and to be in the moment. And then there's a lot of talk of this metaverse. And to give you a quick overview of it, Shireen, don't go into it too much, but I want to just get you familiar with the term. So metaverse, separate from Facebook, which is creating the metaverse apparently, but when we refer to the metaverse, so this is a world that is experienced by a large group of users. So for example, Ready Player One was creating a metaverse, right? It could be fully virtual, okay? So, and at different layers of content within the real world. So, but it's looking at this world where there's a group of different people, large groups that are experiencing mutual presence together. So it might be one thing if I go into a virtual environment, and then let's say as a class, we all had a virtual classroom together, and we were able to put on headsets and look around each other, and it looked just as if we were in a lecture hall. And then you take it off and you go about your lessons. Together, we would be effectively in what would be a metaverse. So I hope that clarifies the basis for immersion and presence, because there's a lot of different definitions and a lot of different perspectives. But at the base, when we look at what it takes to be immersive and to create a sense of presence, and it's actually very similar to what we do in real life too. And working in organizational development, you have companies that are saying, what can I do to engage my employees? What can I do to increase presence in the workspace? So when people come in, they're not phoning it in and they're really present within their work. And when somebody's designing a VR or a metaverse or a VR system, they're asking the same questions. It's just within a virtual world. And because we're still trying to understand, well, what's the difference between our brains in reality and what's the difference in our brains in virtual reality? We're really trying to take what used to be this fairly researched concept, and we're looking at it from a different angle. And so that there's a lot of questions. And so we look at the research for presence or immersion and say, okay, so what does this mean now within a virtual environment? And in a way that it's a lot of what cyber psychology is, where we're looking at human interaction, but we're looking at it within the context of technology. So what does it mean to have social interactions, but now they're online? What does it mean to be in a work environment, but now it's a remote, online, virtual work environment? And so part of the fascinating field of cyber psychology is to be at the forefront of trying to pave the way of what does this all mean? What does this virtual world mean? And we're seeing these technologies be built and evolve. So if you look at where some of these technologies were 10 years ago versus where they are now, I mean, even just graphics in a movie or a video game, they're really evolved and becoming more and more lifelike. So if you pick any video game series, whether it be Resident Evil or Mass Effect or Dragon Age, or I mean, any of these video games, pick one and look at, say, when the first game came out to where the version may be now, and you see, wow, those graphics are really different. They're aspiring to become more and more lifelike, more and more real, more and more subtle facial expressions, facial scarring, even, I mean, facial eye movements. They're trying to become more and more real. And what will that mean for the brain? What will that mean as we strive to understand and build upon the foundations of what we've already learned, and the way that then we advance these current models. So hopefully this gives you the foundation of what immersion and presence is. If you have any questions, please let me know, because being able to really understand presence and immersion and how they relate will help you for the readings and the videos and lectures that you'll be watching, because they begin to then build upon this to be able to explain some of it and to be able to break upon into new models. So hopefully that this builds the foundation for you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.